Excellent. So let's get started. So I'm Joey Moore from Optimizely, and it's great to welcome you to our webinar session today on how to be a leader in an era of digital evolution. So I'm joined with some great participants from Forrester, Optimizely, Netcel, and Siteimprove for this panel discussion. And so let's introduce the speakers joining us today. So first of all, we have Dan Bieler from Forrester, and Dan serves digital and technology leaders by guiding them through the challenges of business evolution. Dan's particular focus is on digital teams, the employee experience, and the future of work. Second to join us today is Deane Barker. Deane's Global Head of Content Management at Optimizely, and he's obsessed with managing, maintaining, and organizing and delivering digital content. He's a best-selling author, written multiple books on the subject, and it's great to have Deane with us today. Third, we welcome Ezekiel Rudick. So he's head of content marketing at Siteimprove. So Ezekiel brings a best-in-class content marketing experience, really ensuring that the right brand stories is delivered to the right audience at the right time. And finally, Dom Graveson from Optimizely Platinum Partner Netcel. And Dom's background is defining and driving digital projects and investment with over 15 years of experience in the enterprise digital evolution space. So thank you very much to our panel for joining us today. So I'm going to just give a little bit of housekeeping as well. So we've got a Q&A box at the bottom of the webinar panel that you should see. There's also a chat. It's much better if you post your questions in the Q&A, then we can sort of manage and sort them, and if there's any that we can, hopefully we'll have some time to get to them at the end. So do use the Q&A box throughout the webinar session, and we'll hopefully have time to pick out some of the highlights at the end. The webinar is going to be recorded and it's going to be sent to all registrants after the event as well. So so we'll be able to share it in a day or two's time. And everyone's going to be on mute just for the benefit of the webinar. So so do use the Q&A to post your questions in there as well. So without further ado, let's dive straight into some of those to some of the questions for the panel. And I guess for me, where I really want to start off is, we're sort of 10 to 15 years in of people have been talking about digital transformation. We're here to really today to be sort of like to be exploring the subject of digital evolution. So I mean, should digital transformation still be used as a term? How do we see that playing out? Dan, over to you first. What's your thoughts on kind of where we are today along this journey?
Thanks. So clearly different organizations are at different stages of their digital transformation. Yes, some have started many, many years ago. Others have started more recently. But I think all of them realized during the pandemic in particular that it's actually a bigger task to master than some form of technology rollout, that there are big implications for how you need to think about processes, how you need to think about operational structures, how you need to think about the culture that you run, in addition, of course, to the technologies. And therefore, I think the discussion, which is quite old, and the discussion around digital transformation is gradually morphing into more of an awareness, a realization that this is much more of a evolution. And so the terminology of technology and digital evolution, I would say, is becoming a little bit more prevalent than just digital transformation. And in addition, what we see is that the discussions that impact issues such as working in an agile fashion, having a more flexible workspace environment, get interwoven into the broader digital transformation debate. And so definitely the path that is ahead will look different for different businesses, but the realization that it's a much longer path than just a bolt-on technology project, that is really pretty much spreading across the entire board what we see.
Cool. Okay, thank you. And Deane, what's your? I know we've talked about this a number of times over kind of months and years in terms of I know you have some pretty strong feelings about digital evolution versus digital transformation.
I do. I think certain terms just kind of enter the zeitgeist, right, of a market or an industry. And digital transformation was one of those terms. I don't know who came up with it, but it just latched on. And I think the reason why it latched on is because we all love the idea of a transformation. We all love the idea of, you snap your fingers. We look at weight loss commercials, the before and after, look at this person's body transformation. We love that idea of going from something to something else and being able to transform. And I think at some extent, and this is going to sound like a very cynical statement, I don't mean it to, but at some extent, everybody is dissatisfied with their digital presence. I think it's a fair statement. And I think in some sense, everybody should be dissatisfied. We should all be trying to get better. But everybody loved the idea of a transformation because transformation is a lovely strategic term that doesn't require any work. You can sit around and think about digital transformation all you want. And I think in this industry, as in most areas in business, we tend to concentrate on strategy because strategy is great. We can think about things with no real accountability. And that's why I love the term either digital evolution or digital incrementalism. The idea that you're not going to boil the ocean, you're not going to snap your fingers and make everything amazing tomorrow. What you're going to do is you're going to come into work today and you're going to make one thing slightly better. You're going to make one thing 1% better, and you're going to stack those changes on each other. I get this. I read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, a couple of years ago, and I've been hung up on the idea of 1% improvement. So if you improve 1% every day, I can't do the math in my head. I don't know what that compounds to, but if you improve 1% a day, and then the next day you improve 1% on that improvement you made the day before, you slowly get so much better all the time. And I think there are a lot of people sitting around talking about digital transformation, kind of waiting for it to magically happen, not understanding that the transformation is a series of tiny evolutionary steps that build on each other over time. But I blame the word transformation. Somebody just came up with a word. I remember back in the 90s when the internet was getting started, the word, I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but the phrase information superhighway, that became like a thing. And I remember that word just like tickled the zeitgeist of the world. And everyone suddenly wanted to talk about the information superhighway. I saw the same thing happen with the phrase digital transformation. We all liked the word. I don't know that we like the reality of it.
I suppose that's that's a case of the more you know about something, the more you become aware that you don't know anything.
Absolutely. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect says that in many cases we're too, this is going to sound pejorative and I don't mean it to, but the Dunning-Kruger effect says that sometimes we're too dumb to know how dumb we are. Right? We don't know enough about a topic to know how little we know about that. And I think the idea of digital transformation was a lot of people stepping back and saying, yeah, we can all transform, it'll be great. And when they get down into the weeds and understand kind of what it takes, suddenly they realize they're way, way over their head. And that's how I saw it play out. And I was trying not to be cynical about it. But at the time, I was deep working in professional services. And I saw just people coming in with wildly unrealistic expectations of how this works. So I think digital incrementalism, I think people need to refocus their expectations from transformation to incrementalism.
Sure. And I think you've got pretty punchy views on the strategy side for a man with strategy in his job title. But there
I know, right? Very, very deeply cynical of my own job title for sure.
Cool. And Don, where do you take this? Because I know you're heavily involved in the Netcel report that really sort of outlined this idea of evolution.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, Deane and I have spent a lot of time talking about this and had some really enjoyable conversations. That report available, netcel.com/report, nice and easy. And maybe someone will post it in the chat. But yeah, I mean, I'm with Deane all the way on this, and also with Dan on it. But I'd like to kind of add, I think also is this idea that, like, isn't the world changing fast these days, and transformation tends to be kind of approaching things historically from a programmatic approach, as in you would identify a need, you would build a plan, you would build a business case around that plan, you would go to the people funding it, you would get 3 years funding for it, and then you would deliver that thing that you said you would deliver within 3 years for the money that you got with the business plan. This was the old way of doing things, a kind of programmatic approach. I mean, the problem is, in 3 years' time, the world isn't going to look like it did when you did the research to find out what you needed. And that's only changing faster and faster. And this idea that, that you can plan out for a predictable future and that has low risk, which has been something that's always really surprised me that people think that having a plan that runs over 3 years is low risk. That's actually high risk. What you need is an incremental evolutionary approach where you are constantly learning, you're constantly adjusting your ambitions, the technologies and methodologies you want to use, the way that you're measuring success, because behaviors change, user behavior changes. I mean, maybe, you know, this may be a dreadful example, but maybe, you know, number of bums on seats in an office used to be a really good way of seeing how efficient your office was, but now that's changed. Look behind me. That's not real, by the way. But you know, this idea that risk management is about lots of pre-planning. Risk management is about building robustness through adaptability. I'm a great fan of Nicholas Taleb's book Anti-Fragile. He's the guy that wrote Black Swan, but his better work, in my view, was a book on how you, in order to be robust and manage risk in your life and in your businesses, you need to be adaptable and open to new ideas and welcome that kind of ambiguity. And you can build that in, and I hope we'll explore some of that today, around how you can build that culture, those processes, and in terms of the technology stack that you use, that robustness and adaptability as a kind of, you know, as a kind of baseline standard set of approaches that you have within your business to be able to evolve, rather than taking this bet, you know, that is likely to be landing in a different world when you deliver it.
You know, Dom, I think you said something really critical there in terms of timescale. Strategy is about these super long timescales, like where are we going to be in 10 years? Nobody knows where we're going to be in 10 years. I mean, seriously, you're lucky if you know we're going to be where in 10 months. And your statement was spot on about long-range plans are an inherent risk. Because if you have a plan that lasts 3 years and you're determined to follow through on that plan, you're going to end up in a place and the market you will have gone left and the market will have gone right. And so the safer plan is to do change in small increments where you can stop and you can reassess where the market is going and make sure that you stay the course. Your grand plan is going to lead you somewhere other than the market, because nobody knows where the market's going.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it a bit there in some of the technology pieces, Dom. So Zeke, where do you see where the sort of the role that emerging technologies play in this piece of, you know, it's a kind of evolutionary thought?
Yeah, I think you know, the proliferation of easy to access technology has definitely made the digital evolution easier. So we've been able to, you know, pull in tools that help us, you know, scale and move quicker. But I think we're living in a digital landscape where many organizations use technology as kind of like a strategy band-aid. So as a result, tech stacks kind of become bloated. They're often not unified, or often operating from the same type of insights or data that they need to pull in. So I think great technology brands know this, that technology is only as good as the strategy driving it. And so so I think they, you know, good software brands, you know, take this partnership seriously, and they work to deeply understand just how to help organizations realize their strategic goals through the lens of the technology offering. So I think that's a critical piece as we move forward into this digital evolution debate around, you know, how do we use technology? I think the question is, how do we use technology to support our strategic initiatives and digital goals, as opposed to how do we, you know, create band-aid solutions for these different strategic initiatives.
Well, I think where you touched on those initiatives, and there's lots of initiatives, and I know, you know, looking through many of the names of the organizations that are joining us today on the webinar, there's lots of people who will be at certain phases or stages through their digital journey. And, you know, there's going to be sort of multiplying sort of driving factors behind that. I mean, Dan, what do you sort of commonly see at Forrester when you're speaking to businesses and organizations? What are those kind of driving factors that are pushing people down this this transformative or evolutionary route?
Well, ultimately, it's the customer expectation that is the driver here. Yes, there are digital technologies. They've been with us for many years now, and they in turn are changing what we expect from a product or a service. And if you think maybe of a smartphone, our smartphone gives us a certain experience, and based on this experience, we have a certain success or a certain satisfaction with it. Now, the problem with digital technologies is that they change quite rapidly, and the same product given a year later would not trigger the same kind of experience. So our expectations are changing as a result of all the experiences that we have all the time, based on different technologies, different applications and products and services that are influenced by digital technologies. And the value proposition that we therefore attribute to a product or service is also changing. So businesses, organizations are really forced to ramp up their digital capabilities because the customer expectations are changing all the time, and with them, the experiences that they can deliver just in order to stand still. Now, this does not mean that the digital technologies play a small role in this momentum here, and you have to keep up with the most important digital technologies, of course. But you ultimately, you need to understand what are the customer expectations and move your strategy in the direction of addressing particular use cases that satisfy a customer demand, a customer requirement and desire. And this is really a big challenge because it goes way beyond just planning for a digital technology rollout.
And do you see those different across different industries as well? Is it a kind of an industry or a geographical thing that kind of expectation point? You know, if I'm in financial services today or professional services or education or something, should I have should I be thinking about this more perhaps, or is it a retail thing, or you know, how much of it do you see sector specific?
In our research, yes, I could share with you that a certain sector is ahead of another sector, but I think this would not really paint the appropriate picture, because ultimately the companies that are truly successful can be found in any sector. It's a mindset shift that is required in order to deliver great digital experiences. So yes, in manufacturing, we see some amazing showcases for digital factories and the usage of digital twins and digital threads and so on. But we can also see amazing solutions coming out in the governmental sector, which statistically speaking is maybe lagging behind the manufacturing sector in terms of the usage of digital technologies. It's really very much about the commitment of senior leadership and their ability to invest in the right digital infrastructure and convince the employees to embrace and adopt the solutions, the digital solutions they put in place, and then come up with the solutions that cater to specific customer requirements. That is the combination, the magic combination that really matters and delivers great digital experiences and digital products and services. So it's less a sector specific or geographic specific issue, because we see amazing digital solutions in emerging countries. We see them in developed countries, and I would be very cautious, because the spectrum of digital innovation reaches from frugal innovation in some rural Indian context to the most cutting-edge high-tech innovation in Silicon Valley. At the same time, the experiences these solutions can deliver might be equally impactful from a customer perspective.
Okay, thank you. And Don, what do you think? So when organizations are coming to Netcel for help and for your expertise, what are you seeing as those drivers? What's really what's driving them when they're coming to you?
Well, I read somewhere, and I thought this is a really nice kind of little analogy for this, is that the leopard isn't quiet and fast by choice. The leopard is quiet and fast because she'll eat more if she's quiet and fast, right? So mainly the leopard will spend most of its time sitting around in the sun. So what you see is organizations, just looking at this widely for a second, organizations that have been disruptive. So it can be across all kinds of sectors, just as Dan says, but it tends to be where organizations either have an ambition to be disruptive, i.e. grow fast, or enter a new market, or diversify, or where they have been disruptive, such as organizations such as some of the big broadcasters like Sky developing Now TV, which was kind of very brave move when they knew that there were disruptive elements, coming from adjacent market areas. But in terms of Netcel, it's a kind of as a sort of smaller view of that. Really, we tend to work with the organisations that are kind of the most challenging and the most fun to work with are ones that have clear ambitions around outcomes, rather than necessarily very clear ideas around, they're open-minded about what they want, but they know what they need to see as outcomes. This is something that we these conversations we have quite regularly, and is around, are we focusing on the outcomes that we need to see rather than the tactical features that we need on our website, or the things that we need on our digital, the things that we need to deliver through our digital channels at a feature level. And I think that focusing on outcomes and then enabling the features and the initiatives to support those outcomes and the measures to be appropriate to proving the value of those outcomes is a kind of characteristic of the most successful of our clients. And just to add, we have this kind of idea of the continuous business case, which is very often these justifications for digital investments are made up front, as I mentioned earlier. But we try and encourage our clients as part of our relationship to have this ongoing, continuous, almost adaptive business case approach, where we're constantly looking at the outcomes, constantly looking at the kind of key golden metrics for measuring success or measuring us meeting that outcome, and then us constantly changing the targets, re-benchmarking, adapting, so that we have that ability to be able to act and pivot on evidence that is weeks old, days old, rather, or even sometimes hours old, rather than months old, or has been defined, many months ago. So that tends to be, the characteristics of success. And also, just very quickly, also the understanding that this isn't just about technology. It's not just about digital experience. It's also about people. So how are you going to make sure that you have the right capabilities across technology, people, and your experience? Okay,
so Deane, I know that you felt strongly about this, but the obsession that people have with transformation. Why do you think they're not talking about evolution? Because we especially since the rise of agile over quite a number of years now, everyone knows this. It should be a known thing, but we still get caught up with this sort of like this older state thinking. Why do you think that is?
So first of all, Joey, I'm trying not to take offense that you preface every reference to me with, I know you have strong opinions about this.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to. I do have great, strong opinions about many things. This is me playing cynic for a second. Actually, I've played cynic for 51 years now, but this is me playing cynic at this moment. Digital evolution is boring. Digital transformation is exciting. I read a great book, one of the best books I've ever read on business. It's called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, and I highly recommend it to anybody. It's the best book I've ever read on business. And 4DX, as it's become to be known, differentiates goals from activities. So goals are places where you want to get. This is digital transformation. It's a goal. But having a goal doesn't really help you. What you need to identify is the activity streams that will lead to that goal, will reasonably bring that goal about. The book talks about what are called lagging measures, and most analytics we look at are lagging measures. And a lagging measure is an analytic that you get, and when you can't do anything to change it. Example of that is I have 2 daughters in nursing school, and my daughter wants to get an A in chemistry. Well, that's a lagging measure. Once she gets that analytic, once she gets the grade that says to her what she can't do anything about it, like it's done. She shouldn't concentrate on the goal of getting an A in chemistry. What she should do is she should sit down and she should ask herself, what are the activity streams that lead to that goal? One activity stream would be do all the reading within 24 hours of being assigned. Another one might be meet with my study group once a week. Another one might be, predict 10 questions that I think are going to be on next week's exam every week. These are activity streams. These are goals that she has control over. She technically doesn't have control over whether or not she gets an A in chemistry. She only has control of the activities that would lead her to that. And there's a correlate here between digital transformation and digital incrementalism. Digital transformation is the goal. It's great. Let's transform. Let's get there. But digital incrementalism, digital evolution, those are the activity streams that are going to get there. If you have a goal of more people visiting your website and converting, stop for a second and think, what are the activity streams? What can I do to help bring this goal about? One of them might be publish a case study once a month. That's something you have control over. That's a leading measure that will result in that lagging measure of more conversions. But nobody wants to do that. There's something icky about getting tactical. We look at getting tactical as infantilizing our teams. Like, we're going to tell you to do this and this and this and this. And I don't look at it that way. I look at it as planning to bring the goal about, actually getting down and doing the work. But in business, too often we glamorize strategy. We glamorize strategy and we subconsciously denigrate the actual work that it takes to bring the goals about. And so I think it's just a major, major shift of thinking with digital teams.
I'm sure that fatherly advice is well received every single time by your daughter.
Yes, they want to get an A in chemistry, and as the man paying the tuition bills, I also want them to get an A in chemistry. Let me assure you.
So, I mean, I think Deane touched on it a little bit there. In just some of those, the one of the things we see is that kind of the perfection being the enemy of good, and how people can obsess over like that goal and the end state. But in terms of how do you see it in terms of, the actually getting things done and making sure that you're kind of completing those activity streams and getting those, taking those steps in the right direction? That's for Zeke.
Oh, yeah. I think I sorry, I didn't hear my name. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to making sure. I mean, I think one of the aspects of digital transformation that we haven't really invested in is this idea of that you have to bring your organization along with you. And so there's an element of I totally agree with Dan's sentiment around, like, there's this analysis paralysis. So people are always looking at strategy, always looking at the big picture, but not willing to get down into the execution mode. And so I think it really comes down to a education of the organization around what digital evolution actually looks like, and really getting everyone on the same page around a test and learn framework. At Siteimprove, a big value of ours as we continually evolve our digital strategy is, move fast, test everything. And so I think a big hurdle to get over is making sure that everyone is in tune with this idea of that. There's most organizations have big, lofty revenue targets and goals to hit that require digital strategy to support, and there's a lot of levers to pull to get us there. And so I think it comes down to bringing your entire organization along with you.
And I think so that's going to be often said at the board level. What are you seeing, Dan, in terms of who are those sort of stakeholders driving these initiatives that you're speaking to?
So I think I don't want this to come off as a generic answer, but I actually truly believe that it's everyone. I think there's been especially as someone who's overseeing brand, I think one of the things that I try to get everyone to wrap their heads around is there are no special perspectives that are elevated above another's perspective. So I look at every business segment in looking at Siteimprove as an example. I look at every business segment within Siteimprove as a brand data point. Like there's something to learn about our digital evolution from every piece of the business. So I think everyone who is, you know, developing the product, people who are selling the product, people who are working with customers to kind of elevate, you know, how they're using the product and how they're hitting their business goals. All those things are data points that we can use to elevate our digital strategy. And for Forrester, when you're engaging with the sort of the senior leadership teams with the companies that you work with, who is it who's driving that, and how's that kind of arranged in terms of like the different stakeholders?
Yeah, in the early days of what now is digital transformation or digital evolution, clearly was more of a tech issue. So the CIO office, the CTO office was responsible for driving digital technologies and implementing some cool digital solutions. But then it became kind of obvious that other people will get involved. Certainly the budgetary questions are located in the finance department. So they need to be very much up to date in terms of what is possible, in terms of the overall business impact. Output-based metrics need to be reflected, not just technology metrics in terms of the deliverables that need to be made available via some form of dashboard. We see that the chief operating officers need to be involved to drive adoption by employees, and HR clearly is involved in terms of driving the digital skills and talents that are required for the operations. The business line managers across all sorts of business lines need to be aware of the digital technologies that are out there to become aware of the possibilities and also, of course, the limitations that digital transformation can deliver. The strategy office needs to be aware of the potential opportunities and threats that are building up as a result of other players entering their market. Often some of the digital native competitors are coming out of nowhere and are heavily disruptive. And ultimately, of course, it requires the CEO to act as the chairman of the board, and actually a very effective way to deal with digital transformation that we have seen over and over again is a virtual team, virtual in the sense that they don't always have to come together in person, but a team of some of the key business leaders that meets on a regular basis to discuss the overall objective of digital transformation, but then also reconvenes to discuss the challenges that are popping up as the digital transformation and digital evolution initiatives are pushed forward, so that if there's a problem, everybody's aware of it. Nobody can hide and point fingers. Everybody needs to find a way how to overcome a particular challenge. And this kind of board needs to be chaired by the CEO, because ultimately that's where the buck stops. Digital initiatives that are not supported at the very top of an organization will always suffer.
And does that tend to be the rest of the C-suite then? And that almost defines, you know, the role of the C-suite in terms of understanding and working with digital, is that they need to have that as part of their responsibility almost.
Yes, they absolutely have to be on top of it. We have seen often organizations where the C-suite is sent to Silicon Valley, or years ago they were sent into certain areas of China to see like this is possible in terms of the digital impact on particular industries, just to make them aware that there is no place to hide just because you are, I don't know, a bank in southern Brazil or so. You need to be aware of what's coming. And so the C-suite is actually being placed in uncomfortable situations where they encounter the most cutting edge digital solutions, just to make them aware of the magnitude of transformation that is required. But as I said, this is not just about the technology. This is about the operational processes that need to be adjusted, about the structure of a business itself that needs to be adjusted. And ultimately, and that's the toughest part of the overall objective, the culture, the business culture has to change very radically. And that's where we see the C-suite is often actually more of a hesitant player in the game rather than someone that is absolutely keen to push to transform the culture.
That's interesting. Did you want just expand on that a bit, just in terms of the culture piece, because there's going to be this significant impact on the workforce and the management, and how are the sort of organizations either bringing that along, or as you say, there's some hesitation or some friction in terms of how it's going to impact that part of it?
Yeah. So during the pandemic, we have seen that many organizations, many departments are surprisingly flexible and agile. And this is reflected even today, where we see that roughly 70%, 75% of employees really enjoy the greater flexibility of hybrid working and a more flexible working environment overall. Managers, on the other hand, are much more cautious. They have something to lose, that they have certain power structures arranged for themselves over the last 10, 20, 30 years, and have reached a certain level within their organizations that they don't want to give up so easily. And flatter hierarchies, more agile working, teams that constantly regroup depending on what kind of projects they're working on, the change of the manager transforming into a coach more so than the classic top-down hierarchical management style. There are lots of factors that make it that are really challenging for managers, in particular mid-level managers we see that need to be addressed as part of digital evolution or digital transformation activities. There's a senior leadership. Once they get it, they tend to get it, but they find it very hard to really transform the mid-level management layer. That is a very common problem area, if I can put it this way.
That's interesting. So, I mean, Dom, obviously, when you're working with clients, there's the upfront work, and then there's the delivery piece, and then what does it kind of look and feel like, as that the technology or that some of those initiatives are starting to be rolled out within the organization? What is, I mean, did you recognize that it's been driven at the top and there's a level of friction in the middle?
Well, there's several things at play here. I mean, really interesting what Dan was saying about middle managers, and I completely agree. I think in a sense they get it the toughest, because it's really quite easy at the C-suite to go on a strategy away day, go and see some great stuff and come back and dictate this stuff from the top. What's really difficult is to put in place the empowerment for people in middle management and people at the front line to deliver, or to be able to deliver three things that I think are really important. One of them is accountability, which is around owning the impact and benefits that you would have within the business, rather than just meeting measures that you have been set. And as Deane very rightly said, those measures are usually lagging measures, which will tell you when you failed, rather than to indicate to you the behaviors that you are looking for that will enable you to succeed. The second thing is around insights. So it's around making sure that everybody has access to cross-functional and cross-industry and product line data points, where they're able to gather information and be able to build hypothesis. So if we do this, then perhaps this will happen. Or if we do this or this, then perhaps we run an experiment where this outcome might be delivered. That's around insight. And then finally, the thing around bravery and vulnerability. And I think bravery and vulnerability are in many cases the same thing in business, which is that we all have to be prepared to be comfortable with ambiguity and comfortable with screwing up once in a while. No one, and this is back to this evolutionary idea, no one gets it right in business all the time. And the greatest business leaders often are talking about how many times they've screwed up, because they realize that really it's about how much you try and about how good you are at building hypothesis based on insights that make it more likely that you will succeed. So when you see those things in place, and that the C-suite and the leadership team have put in place a governance process that enables, the everyone at the front line and in the middle to be able to be measured, incentivized in a way that is kind of aligned with this new incremental approach, then you'll see that change very quickly, will much more quickly happen. What I've been struck by is that actually you don't really need to teach people very often quite so much about how this stuff works. There might be specifics of a software platform, or specifics of a brand, communication, tone of voice. But actually, we all use, LinkedIn. We all use social media. The younger people are in the organization, the more frontline they tend to be. Even the junior people, they tend to be more digital native. I hate that term, but more comfortable with digital. And actually, they've been kind of dying for you to let them kind of do this stuff for ages. And really, what leaders need to do is be very clear about setting the objectives, very determined in creating the conditions for success for their teams by understanding them, empathizing them, and then furiously defending them for them to be able to be successful and get on with their work. So kind of get out the way and let them do the stuff that you've asked them to do.
If I can just add there, I totally agree with Dom and Deane, and I think it's the combination of having these input metrics as opposed to the output metrics that Deane was talking about, and then combine it with the incentive structures that Dom was hinting at. So I think that is a powerful combination of really creating a momentum where a team, overall a team, is pulling in the same kind of direction.
I mean, one other thing, just very quickly to add to that, is that if you're going to think about encouraging digital evolution, incrementalism, or innovation, you've got to be quite careful about it. It's a bit like telling someone you love them. You can't tell them it and then not mean it. So you have to, if you're going to roll out a program or an initiative around driving innovation, you have to make sure that everyone in the organization can enable it, because there's nothing worse than saying, come at us with all your ideas and then never following up on them, because you're asking people to be vulnerable and asking them to be brave, and then you're not rewarding them for that. And that is culturally incredibly important.
So I just want to jump in because, Dom, I really thank you for bringing up the idea of vulnerability. Google once did a project, they called it Project Aristotle. And what they did is they looked at all the teams across their organization. They identified the high performing teams. So teams of people that consistently delivered above other teams. And then they did a positive deviance study on these teams, which they determined how did these teams deviate from average or low performing teams. And they found out the number one indicator of team performance was what they called psychological safety. Members of people on teams that did not feel that they would be punished for bad ideas, did not feel that they would be laughed at or not taken seriously, that felt psychologically and emotionally safe with their team members, these were high performing teams. And Dom opened the door to that, where one of the things about digital transformation is that nobody wants to propose evolution because it's realistic and not glamorous. Everyone wants to propose the big thing because they want to be taken seriously. Nobody wants to step forward and say, hey, look, realistically, I don't think we can deliver that. Realistically, I just think we can take these steps to get a little bit better. But nobody wants to do that because they don't want to be that person with low ambition that can't deliver that. They don't feel psychologically safe enough to be real and honest about what their capabilities are.
And that's profound, because also that influences career cycles and retention of the best people in your business. Because if you have a 2-year view where the people are encouraged to come up with a big plan that either works a bit or doesn't work, if it works, they're off to the next job. If it doesn't work, they're off to the next job. You're never going to keep people more than 2 or 3 years. And isn't it interesting how people don't seem to hang around for more than 2 or 3 years?
That's the thing. We're not even talking about employee retention, which is huge on employee retention. One thing that employees hate is when grand pronouncements of grand new plans and architectures are delivered from on high and never followed through on. Things employees love is actually getting stuff done, reasonable steps they can take to getting things done. I believe that a focus on digital evolution improves employee morale and will reduce employee turnover, increase employee retention. And that is a massive hidden cost for many organizations, that a shocking amount of institutional knowledge walks out the door every single year. It's one of the biggest, most hidden losses for companies, is the amount of loss they have.
And Dan, what do you think in terms of, so, we're talking about those expectations, the expectation of the employee, the expectation of the business and the leadership. a lot of these initiatives, you know, there's horror stories littering the sort of the history books, but a lot of these initiatives fail. And what is it? Why is it they fail? What are the sort of the core reasons that they can't push these initiatives through, or that these initiatives aren't deemed as successful?
Yeah, in the past few years, what we have seen is that a lot of the digital transformation initiatives were pushed and treated as a digital bolt-on project. So just a small part of the organization was addressed really mostly with digital technologies that were introduced, rolled out, and then you're done, because that's clearly the idea of transformation. There's point A where you start and point B where you complete the project. As we have seen in this discussion, the project is an ongoing, probably never-ending kind of process. And to really have an effective digital evolution initiative, we believe that you need to really focus on what needs to be done. What is the overall objective of the digital project? The unclear focus is definitely the number one reason why a lot of digital initiatives fail. So these digital bolt-on projects where nobody really thought about, you know, the overarching reason why you're doing this. So the crucial part is that people understand what they are working on. And by this, I mean that you need to understand what are you trying to address? Which customer pain point are you trying to address? If you think about the customer life cycle overall, at which stage are we trying to address which kind of customer desire, requirement, and pain point with this particular solution that we are ramping up here? And I think it was Deane who said we need to break up the transformation process or the evolutionary process into smaller bits and pieces. So these modular components add up to much more. And if you get it right, these smaller bits and pieces, and address specific customer requirements, then you're onto something. Because if we look at it, innovation is really what people can do once they truly understand what they're inventing and why they're inventing it. So it's the focus on specific requirements, specific problems that is absolutely essential to get right. Another way to put it is you need to understand what you're doing before you think about how you want to do it.
That's I'm sure, you know, as we're getting into some of the specific and the recommendations we'll be looking at. But Zeke, why is it you see that the digital initiatives aren't working? You know, they sort of, there's more transformative or evolutionary digital initiatives.
Yeah, I think Dan's point around focus is a huge thing. So like this idea that, you know, I think when people launch into this, you know, this mindset of digital evolution, they're trying to tackle everything all at once. So so I think focus is clear and really zeroing in on like exactly a little bit of exactly what Dan just said, which was like, how do you focus in on the actual things you need to accomplish through digital evolution, and, you know, pick the three initiatives that, you know, will drive the business forward. I think the good thing about focus is you can learn pretty quickly if you're getting it wrong. And I think a huge piece of evolution is, you know, that vulnerability piece of owning when you made the wrong call and pivoting quickly. So yeah.
And Dom, when you're sort of, I mean, how do you see the I suppose some of the mistakes that are made? You know, definitely the positive is, you know, the focus piece seems to be key, but where, other than people not having that focus, are there other things that you see along the journey of people kind of?
I'm gonna mention one drawback, and then I'm going to give you some kind of, hopefully some positive things that people can go away and think about, because I'm just, you know, kind of a bit aware of the time. One of them is, I mean, one of the biggest issues is a misunderstanding of the total cost of ownership, and this idea that, you know, digital evolution requires this open mind, this non-programmatical approach, where you are constantly reviewing the benefits, the impacts of the work, and what you need to do to ensure that the right conditions are in place to do it. But to enable you to not get kind of drawn into or stuck in that swampland, as it were, there are things that you know that are really important. And I think that one of them is to pick the right pioneering projects. So I think Zeke and all, Dan and Deane all mentioned this, is that like finding the right projects that are important to be pioneering projects for digital. You can't change everything all at once. There's this idea of T-shaped transformation, which is that you give the flat part of the T as something for everyone. So make it demonstrably valuable, but to a small degree for everyone, but then go deep to really prove your the new ways of working are effective with one group. And if that's successful, the light will shine on others. People will smell the toast and come to the kitchen, you know, and in a sense, you don't need to then drive that adoption. It drives itself because people want to be part of something exciting and successful. But in order to do that, you need to think about some kind of tactical things like experimentation. It's the heart of much of what you're doing. And if it isn't, you need to get prepared for it. Big broadcaster Sky was at a conference the other day. Sky was talking about how they don't launch anything on their customer facing on their kind of acquisition channel, any new features unless they've been experimented. So, you know, this idea of having things hypothesis based on insights, but then test them, because what users tell you they want and then what they actually want are often different things. So you're learning half up front, half afterwards, leading and lagging, and making sure that you've got people who are digitally savvy and digitally experienced. I think 15 years now, 20 years into the digital revolution, whatever you want to call it, people in leading, you know, most people in your organization should be comfortable using digital and being you know, comfortable in that area. And I think that's really important. But also this idea of having the right technology and building technology stacks based on capability rather than necessarily solving a problem now, so that you're building enterprise architectures that are based on the capability. Do we have the capability to be able to offer experiences across platforms? Do we have the capability to be able to use content generated in one place that can then present across all channels? And do we have the capability to be able to use the data we have to orchestrate those experiences across those channels? They're just some of them, but I think that they're the things that are really important to go away and kind of think about, and how you put in place the conditions to enable those. So
as people are going away with lots of thoughts, you know, so some of the great discussions today, what's the key points or the key activities, those leading activities perhaps that the people should be really looking at over the next 3, 6, 12, 18 months ahead of us in terms of things, what they can actively do now? You know, there's a lot of talk, there's some great information in the report as well, but Dan, what's the kind of some of the stuff that you know you'd be advising clients today to actually be sort of really grasping?
I would definitely argue that customers, organizations should really spend enough time on trying to define a problem. Just to give you a little bit of context, Amazon is spending roughly 80% of any project's time on defining the problem. It's a process called working backwards, and the defining problem is comprised in writing a press release, just a one-pager, but a lot of time is spent on getting this right. Because once you start with the problem, then you know what you're solving for. And then they can really focus on this what part before they move on to the how. Because once you know what you need to solve, the how becomes much easier. And clearly it will take often several hows before you know. The right approach, the right how to solve for the what. So I would say spend time on defining the opportunity, the challenge, the problem, before you rush out and start yet another project that might not address any particular requirement of any customer or employee, and you just waste a lot of money and time on it.
That's a great one. And Zeke, in terms of sort of what would your recommendation be, you know, as people are sort of going away back into their businesses and really continuing on this journey?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to, you know, content experience. And I think if your digital evolution strategy doesn't really include creating experiences that your users want, I think you're missing a big piece of your brand strategic puzzle. So I think a big part of this is, you know, delivering those experiences on the channels where your users live, where they consume content. And you know, obviously this is changing quickly, so this goes back to the, you know, being agile and adapting quickly. So you need to have, you know, tools that help you understand exactly what your target audience wants and how to optimize that content accordingly, and how to, you know, quite literally how to deliver execute on your digital strategy across all your different channels.
And I suppose that reflects quite nicely how Dan started with, you know, it's around that customer expectation. If that customer has an expectation for these heightened experiences anyway, if you're not delivering that content experience, you're going to be falling a pretty early hurdle.
Absolutely.
And Deane, what are your sort of recommendations? I know you're spending a lot of time with Optimizely clients, and you know, who are at different phases throughout that transformation or that evolution. What is it you're seeing?
You know, I got two things. The simple one is, when in doubt, create content. I think one thing organizations are great at talking about is creating content. One thing organizations are less good at doing is actually creating content. And so, I mean, when in doubt, create content. Your users, your customers want content. But from a strategic standpoint, I hesitate to use that word because we've kind of given that word a bad name over the last hour. Take a step back and make sure you have the trust of people above you in the org chart. Make sure that the people above you in the org chart are not just wanting vague promises about transformation. Sit down with them and say, look, this is what I think we can actually do. Sit down with them and don't talk to them about lagging measures. Don't talk to them about goals, but talk about them about leading measures. Talk to them about activities and say, look, if we deliver these things, which we reasonably think will lead to this goal, will that meet your expectations? And if they say no, and if you believe they're absolutely stone cold determined to get some vague promises of digital transformation, you know, Optimizely's hiring, I guess. Come talk to us. It's just, if you don't have the trust of the people above you in the org chart to concentrate on activities and concentrate on incrementally improving things rather than honestly telling lies about transformation, then you probably need to find a new job.
Wow. And Dom, well, what's your recommendation for our attendees today?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the guys have said, you know, kind of some really useful things. The only thing I would really add is to reiterate: don't try and do it all at once. If you're going to get started, pick something that is important to the business and that everybody sees the value in, and do what you can to ensure that you've got the conditions for success. That's the right tech, the right processes, the right governance in place. If it feels like, as Deane is saying, it feels like it kind of, you're talking about something that it doesn't feel that there's a clear pathway to doing, to action, and to value, then there's something wrong. And that's where, in a sense, where if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. And that's where to put in the energy. So if it feels like, you know, we've been asked to do this stuff, but we still have to report in ways that are the old way, that are looking at lagging metrics, that are looking at, you know, that doesn't encourage my teams or my colleagues to be inquiring, to have access to the insights they need, then challenge that. You know, every organization is unique. And in a sense, you can't kind of have every organization will have a different journey to this, but there are common problems and common things that we talked about today. So, you know, yeah, have a look at the report. Come and talk to us if anything kind of, you know, has struck you today. Where, you know, I'd love to talk to anyone about the challenges they're having. yeah, but I think, you know, that's the thing, is be realistic, be realistic with your ambitions and what you can achieve, and start small and drive value quickly. That's
fantastic. So in a summary, we've got defining the problem very clear, the content experience focus around that, ensure you got buy-in from the leadership that you're heading in the right direction, and then that focus and validate bit. So some really great and key takeaways. So I'd like to thank all of my speakers today, and I'd also like to thank our attendees. We're going to be sending out the recording over the next few days, so thank you very much, and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.